This story occurred in the summer of 2008. I grew up in Oregon and was acquainted with the outdoors at an early age. My favorite hobby came to be hiking, particularly in areas that are either very dangerous or isolated. The health benefits of hiking were secondary to the thrills of walking the edges of exposed cliffs, being in cougar and bear territory, and knowing that I was far from help. Into the Wild was released in the fall of 2007, and I immediately fell in love. Being a high school senior, I felt imprisoned in my parents' house. A teenager with wild eyes, the movie spoke to my sense of adventure. It inspired me to hike the Oregon portion of the Pacific Crest Trail upon graduation. For the uninitiated, the PCT is a 2,700-mile north-south trail from the border of Mexico to that of Canada. It traverses deserts, forests, and mountains. It ranges from sea level to 13,000 feet elevation. The reason I tell you this is because, needless to say, some parts of the trail are more remote than anything you can imagine. You aren't hiking outside of Portland or Eugene here. You're hiking through hundreds of miles of untamed wilderness in what is essentially the Wild West. I had already completed portions of the trail farther south and arrived in Oregon without much incident. I happened upon rattlesnakes and black bears, experienced legitimate dehydration, but nothing happened that made me fear for my life. Somewhere in the Mount Hood National Forest, I walked around a bend in the trail only to be startled by two people sitting on a rock dressed in nearly all white. Their faces were dirty, their appearance disheveled, and the man had a long, unkempt beard. Both seemed to be in their 40s. They looked like they hadn't seen civilization in years. What struck me as odd about the encounter was encountering anybody at all. I frequently went days without seeing a single human being on the PCT. Their white clothes could be explained away by the need to escape the Oregon summer sun. Their scruffy appearance could be explained away by the fact that most thru-hikers abandon personal hygiene on the trail. After I said hello, they said nothing and simply watched me as I passed. Even that I didn't find odd. I chalked it up to them being foreign and not knowing what to say. I camped a few hundred yards off the trail that night, as I always did, following bare precautions. I hung the leftover food I had cooked that night from a tree approximately 5 feet off the ground. Packing up camp in the morning, I noticed the food wasn't there. I immediately thought a bear had entered my campsite, and so I began to look for paw prints. I didn't find paw prints, but I did find boot prints circling the campsite. 2 pairs of them. One of those prints led right up the rope from which the food was hanging. I thought of the couple I had passed earlier, and everything clicked. I quickly packed up and left. My mind was racing the entire day, but I figured the couple was simply hungry. If they had nefarious intentions, they would have come for more than the food. Several days passed and my mind was at ease again. I had begun to circle my campsite with sticks to wake me in the event of an intruder, animal or otherwise. I awoke in my tent one night to the sound of those sticks crunching. I grabbed my hunting knife. I tried to relax by telling myself that in the middle of nowhere, the source of that noise is much more likely an animal than a person. Then I heard frantic whispering. It was impossible to tell which direction the voices were coming from. Being in the dark, surrounded by trees, 100 miles from the nearest city placed tricks on your senses. I debated yelling out, claiming to have a gun, but instead decided to be silent and retain the benefit of surprise. I heard footsteps circling my tent and was ready to slash at whatever opened it. But just like that, it was over. No more footsteps. No more whispering. I lay frozen, awake in my tent until sunrise, and opened my tent to find nobody there. The only evidence something had actually happened were the boot prints, the same as before. Several more days passed and I was now in the Umpqua National Forest, probably 50 to 75 miles from where I first encountered the couple. The trail became more or less a goat trail. Being on the side of a mountain and above the tree line, I could see the trail winding from miles in front of me and behind me. I stopped for water in the rare shade and noticed two hikers miles behind me. All I could see were two white dots moving along the mountainside. I immediately said out loud, "Fuck this trip is over." I pulled out my map and looked for the nearest town, which appeared to be Oak Ridge. The only problem was that it was 25 miles away. I hiked well into the night trying to gain as much ground as possible. I kept losing the trail and decided to set up camp, this time far off the trail and deep into the forest. I got in my tent and tried to sleep, but every little noise kept me awake. After a few hours in my tent, I heard the telltale signs of another bad night. The footsteps, the whispering, the sticks breaking. Sound travels far in the absence of other sound. I knew they were close, but wasn't sure how close. All I could think was, this is fucked up. This is so fucked up. God damn it. Finally, a flashlight hit my tent, lighting up the entire thing before going dark. I unzipped my tent and climbed out carrying my knife, yelling nonsense into the darkness. It was like one of those cliché scenes in movies where people in the wilderness hear sticks breaking around them and the camera pans around the trees because nobody knows which direction the sound is coming from. Then I heard footsteps running towards the tent and barely made out a figure moving in my peripheral vision. I turned and ran deep into the forest. I tripped several times and ran into several trees. After running for approximately 5 minutes, I tripped, rolled, and came to rest next to a downed tree. I crawled beneath the trunk and lay still. I saw the flashlight moving around in the distance. I stayed under that tree for hours. Eventually, birds started chirping, and I knew sunrise would come soon. Once it did, I made my way back to the trail, abandoned my campsite, and walked the rest of the distance to Oak Ridge. I hitchhiked my way to Eugene and spoke with the police and Forest Service. They put me up in a motel for the night, and my parents drove from their home in Oregon to pick me up the next day. I followed up with the police and Forest Service months later, who told me there had been similar reports of items disappearing from campsites throughout the surrounding national forests. However, there had been no other reports of the terrorizing that I experienced. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the couple.
Not much of a signal out here, but here goes nothing, I suppose. With any luck, this will actually post and I'll be able to get some answers. Knowing what is out there would definitely put my mind at ease. Before we go any further, I should probably give some backstory. I'm sure everyone reading is aware of the current state of the world. A lot of fear and worry going on about the epidemic. I won't linger too much on that. I don't want this post too political. What I'm saying is, my family, like a lot of people, currently have a lot of free time and are keen on keeping away from the general public. My dad and I decided to plan a father and son wilderness trip. It had been a while since we had spent quality time together, and with my wife being an essential employee, she wouldn't have time to come, so everything fell in place for a great father-son weekend. I booked a small cabin out in the Blue Mountains of eastern Oregon, just off the main road near La Grande, got my fishing license, and we packed up the truck. After a few hours' drive, we made it through the bumpy, uneven road to the lakeside cabin. It was a cute little shack with a kind of tiny house set up. A main little area with a pull-out couch, fireplace, table, and a lifted bed up top. Since we like fishing and hiking around, we didn't need too much space in the cabin. Plus, with it still being a tad cold, anything is better than a tent. We didn't waste too much time as it was already late in the afternoon once we got our stuff inside. We grabbed our poles and tackle, and sure enough, in only a few hours we both maxed out and carried our dinner back to the cabin. The fish weren't anything impressive, just average-sized rainbow trout, maybe even a bit on the small side. We did eat all 10 after all. Soon enough, night was upon us. We sat around the campfire, both of us guitars in hand, beer in our camp share cup holders. I even remembered to bring a bit of weed with me, so all in all, it was a really great night. After a few beers and hours had gone by, my old man decided to call it a night. I said goodnight and told him I'd be in a bit. As I was sitting by the fire, smoking a blunt, I admired the quiet ambiance the mountains of Oregon offers. Frogs croaking, crickets chirping, the occasional fish splashing. Hell, I even heard a cow a ways off. One sound in particular caught my attention. It sounded like a yelp. I peeked up, looking around even though my line of visibility basically died at the edge of the firelight. A few seconds passed, and I heard it again, a bit louder, but still the same sound. As the minutes passed, the amount of time between the sounds lengthened. Each time, the sound changed a little too. At first, it just sounded like quick yelps, but they grew into what sounded like, well, it sounded like words. I couldn't make out what it was, though. It almost sounded how people do when they are far away, like when you can tell they are yelling at you, but you can't tell what they are saying. Soon enough, the pauses became minutes long. I honestly thought whatever animal it was had went to sleep. Right as I began to relax, however, something made a noise that made me stand straight up out of my seat and drop my blunt. It was the same kind of sound, that far away sounding noise, but this time it sounded like, I know it couldn't have been. It sounds crazy, but it sounded like someone saying help. I stood there in shock, hair on my neck standing on end. It felt like forever had passed as I stood there waiting for another sound, but eventually the fire began dying. After about 20 minutes, I decided I was obviously just really crossfaded, and my mind was just trying to make sense of the noise in the night. Hopefully, this post actually makes it through. My phone can barely even smell a cell tower this far out, so we'll see. If any of you zoologists out there have an idea of what kind of animal I described, maybe a bird, I'll keep you updated if I make any discoveries in the morning.